Good morning, life changers. Thank you for joining today. Today's going to be a fun one because this is one of my very favorite topics because it goes with one of my very favorite programs that we run here at the Equine Connection, and it is all about active listening. Now, one thing that we have figured out throughout the years is that when we are doing a program or we're doing a briefing or we're talking to people don't really listen to us. And it's nothing bad. Like, it's not like we're sitting, oh, people don't listen to us, because it's just that people got stuff going on in their brains, right? And that's fine. It's just part of life, is that we have to go through those pieces too. But when we talk about active listening, this is how do we get people in when we really need to make sure we're having a conversation where both parties are actively listening to one another. And what is even the active part of active listening? So that's what we're going to be talking about a bit today. And I say we, by me. My partner and in crime is missing today, but that's okay. This just means that I want audience participation. So that will help me if there's more people on, but I don't see really anyone on quite yet. So hopefully this is actually working. But just to go through the good old rigmarole before we get started here. First thing is if I say something today about active listening that really like floats your boat, you think, oh, wow, that's something I hadn't maybe thought of before, throw in that hashtag, do it myself, holy jumping tuna fish, or the little tuna fishies, because we like to know what has made a difference for you today, or what is something that you might want to hear more about in the future as well. Also, please share this out, because sharing is in fact caring. And active listening is one of those things, if we could all learn to do some of these little tips and tricks that we are actively listening within a conversation, we could have a lot better conversations with a lot less conflict in it. Because 98% of conflict is miscommunication, right? So again, we talked about communication last week. This is just another piece of it, but a really, really important piece as well. So please do share this out. Then, of course, the lovely hashtag, we are life changers, because we'll doggone it, every single one of us is. It doesn't matter if you are a human being or an animal or a dentist or a lawyer or maybe the janitor at a school. You have the capacity to change someone's life every single day. And that's something we should keep in mind, because kindness matters and how we treat other people matters. And we are all life changers that have the ability to do so. And then, of course, last place, if you are catching this on replay, do throw in that replay as well so we can come back and say hi to you. Okay, so just before we get into active listening a little bit more, I'll introduce myself. My name is Carolyn Charles. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing, as well as an instructor and facilitator for the Equine Connection, the Academy of Equine Assisted Learning, Inc. And I do love to know who it is that I'm talking to as well. So if you are watching live right now, please let me know that you're there and where you're from, because it's nice to say hi, and I'm all by myself. So I like the interaction piece. That'll make me happy today. So what we do here is we work with horses to help change people's lives, one skill at a time, essentially. So when people are coming in, it's not a matter of just having a fun day with horses. It's that they're actually coming in to build a skill through objectively driven programs. And the lovely piece is that the teacher in all this is the horse. It takes a lot of pressure off of us as well. But without those horses, I don't know if we could do the same. Well, I know we couldn't do the same thing that we do. But we get to see people enter our arena, go through these programs, and have something life-changing in the moment. And that's exactly what happens right in the moment with the horses, where they choose to make a behavioral change or choose to implement a skill that's going to take back with them into everyday life as well. So we truly are blessed to be part of this career, and we believe that this is where the life changer part comes in. This is our piece. This is our purpose. Good morning, Colleen. Nice to see you on. So that is what we do here. But today we're going to be talking about the active listening piece of things. So with active listening, we've all had those conversations before where even if we're on the listening side of it, somebody says something and you kind of stare blankly at them for a moment, blink a couple times, and realize you have heard nothing of what they have actually said. It happens to all of us regularly. But at the end of the day, it's really important that people feel heard. Now, feeling heard is what takes the winds out of the sails of conflict. So if you are ever in a conflict situation where one is starting to brew in a conversation, people want to feel heard. They want to know that you've heard what they have said in all this. And when we run this through with a program, it's interesting because we get to bring the horse piece into that too. Because not only do we have to hear and understand our team members, we have to hear and understand our horse and put all those pieces together. So when we have the horse in, they do a beautiful job of being that buffer for us too. But how do we do this even as people? How do we get the active part into the active listening? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the active listening cycle today. Now, I'm sure if any of you have been in a corporate environment or anything like that at any point, you've probably heard a little bit about the active listening cycle. but it's phenomenal. If you could utilize this a lot in your life, it really is phenomenal how much more quality conversations you can have, because the conflict piece of it, or the escalation, starts going down as soon as people can hear it. And men are different than women in this, and how we want to have these conversations and what we need out of conversation. But if we can be honest in those pieces and then actually listen to the other person that we're talking to, it can be a huge change into the kind of conversation that we're having as well. So again, if you guys have any examples of things that you guys have done for active listening, or pieces maybe you've learned along the way, throw them in the comments too, because I always like to hear other ways of doing things as well. But we'll kind of talk about this active listening cycle first and foremost, and then go from there. So the first piece, and we'll kind of pretend as if this is in a perfect world. So you've got one sender of information and one receiver of information. So in this, maybe there's a conversation that started and things are starting to get a little testy. So what do we need to do? Well, the first thing that needs to happen in any conversation is that the sender needs to send a message, right? Now, in a perfect world, how do they actually send a message? So it's interesting because we forget about a lot of pieces of communication when we are in a conflict situation. But if we can actually bring those pieces back in, we can send a quality message and actually get a different response from it. So the first thing is that we really want to go for clarity. So you want to have a clear and concise message that you're putting out there, rather than adding a whole bunch of extra stuff into it. Just a clear and concise message of what you're getting across. In this, you kind of want to watch tone. Anybody who has kids recognizes how important tone is. There's a big difference of, hey, Mom, can I go to the movies after dinner? Or, Mom, you never let me go to the movies after dinner, right? There's a big difference in how you're going to react from those pieces too. Tone is very, very important as far as to how we are presenting our message in a conversation. And it's an easy thing, but we have to be able to kind of remove emotion, because if this is getting into a bit of a conflict situation, you got to be able to take the emotional side out of things, which means you're not making a lot of accusatory statements, or you made me feel like this because. It's more like, I'm feeling this way right now because, or something along those lines. So it's just the reframing of how we're actually putting a message out there versus it being accusatory or anything else like that too. So really pay attention to how much emotion you're putting into the message that you're sending across. So tone, clarity, you want to make sure you're taking a little bit of emotion out. So it's just a clear, concise message. Hey, Lisa, nice to see you on too. You want to be able to do these messages as well with nice, good, open body language. Now, we've all met, people before where their body language says something very different than what their words say, or their face says something very different than what their words say. Most of communication is in body language. If you're having a face-to-face conversation with someone, your body language tells them more than your words ever will. So if you're starting to get into a bit of a conflict situation possibly, and you want to make sure that you're getting to a place of listening, you need to dial back the crossed arms, even though it might be comfortable. I understand that. I like standing that way too, or the hands in the pockets, or hands on hips. Those are all different types of body languages that may not bring about the best response. So you want an open body language, something that you can kind of try to remove the resting bitch face, as we hear lots of people call it. You want to make sure you're having a nice open body language to have this conversation. And again, even spacing is huge in how you do that piece. We talked about that a few weeks ago in communication, about how does spacing work into that in boundaries. If you're in someone's face, again, that's going to put somebody on the defensive right away, and you're not going to be able to even get the message out before there starts going to a higher level of conflict too. Those are my three favorite poses, Lisa says. I know, they're so comfortable. They really are, and I get that too, but it's nice open ways to do it. If you got to do something with your hands, put like just your thumb in your pocket or something like that to kind of keep it a little bit more open. Otherwise, people do react a little bit differently. What was I saying before that? We got sidetracked. Oh, the body language piece too, and how important it is. But really making sure that you have those open pieces available, so you're having a conversation that people aren't automatically on the defensive with. That's super important in all of this as well. Oh, boundaries, that's where I was going with it. Spacing is huge. So 2 to 3 feet is a good space. You start infringing on that or leaning into somebody, that automatically will put somebody on the defensive and wanting to back away from you, or wanting to engage in like some sort of physical piece of it. So you don't want those things. Nice boundaries and spacings when you're having these conversations as well. Same as yelling it from across the house. That's it's not going to help you, right? Because then you're not even seeing the body language. You're just getting a weird tone, and it doesn't feel like it's an important enough conversation that you would be in the same room actually making eye contact with someone. Eye contact is kind of a cool piece of it too, because you have to be a little bit careful with it. There's many cultures that eye contact isn't necessarily the best thing to do when you're having a conversation, but you don't want to be staring somebody down either. Like blink. It's good to blink while you're doing these things as well. But really watch, because depending on the type of person that you're talking to, eye contact could be a very intimate feel to them, right? So you don't want to be staring somebody down with the eye contact, but you do want to make sure that you have their attention. I think Carrie and I talked to last week with the communication piece as well, that eye contact is one of those things just to make sure someone's in the conversation with you. Like if mom is chopping up vegetables at the kitchen table and doing that, we aren't at the active listening point where you have to get to the mom, are you listening to me? That sort of thing as well. So yes, we've gone through, okay, tone, we've gotten their body language, eye contact, clear message. I think these are all pretty good things. That sounds good. For anything else you guys want to add, top it in there too. But basically, once somebody has sent a message, how do you ever actually know that you have genuinely been heard by that person? And a lot of times we get the answers back by they're looking at you, or they're nodding, or something like that, or they respond. All good things. But you still don't actually know that they have heard exactly the words that have come out of your mouth unless we go to a place where they actually take the time to repeat it back. So this is the active piece of the active listening cycle, is the actual repeating back the words that you said. Now you want to repeat these things back as close as you can to what was actually said in the first place. Because if you start to paraphrase or add extra bits on or add a tone, tone could be scary in there too. You don't want to do those pieces. You just want to repeat it back. So your phrase could be, so what I hear you saying is. Now, this is something to be a little bit cautious with as well. For myself, if I'm in a conversation and I say, okay, so what I hear you saying is, it doesn't, like, I don't know, it doesn't mesh with my personality or sound like something I would say. So I have to kind of rephrase that a little bit for myself and say it is more like, okay, so what I got from that is, right? So it's still saying what I got from that. It's putting the onus on what I have heard, but it just comes out in a different way that is a little bit more my verbiage, right? Rather than throwing out something that it sounds like I'm trying to like shrink them or something like that. People don't like that piece either. So what I got from that is something along those lines. Lisa, because of this wonderful course, I learned that the repeating part creates a place of clarity. It's wonderful. It is so wonderful, Lisa. Like, I love this thing so much. And I should kind of preface this too. If you're already at a place of like pure yelling, screaming conflict or something like that, and then all of a sudden you swing in, well, what I hear you saying is, it's probably not going to go the same way, right? This is something that you want to get to the preemptive place where we are just de-escalating conflict or de-escalating an argument in some way, or really just helping someone to be heard. It doesn't even necessarily have to be in a full conflict situation yet. But the active listening cycle, you're right, Lisa, this is phenomenal. And this is something I use in all facets of life whenever I can, because it helps people to feel like I've taken the time to actually hear what they've said. So again, my phrase is, okay, so what I got from that is, and I will repeat back as close to what they said to me as possible. Now, if they were to look it back at me and said, that's not what I said. Okay, can you just repeat it? Okay, I misheard, or, you know, as facilitators will go, oh, our old lady years, can you repeat one more time for me? And then that way it gives people the opportunity to say what they needed to say again. Maybe they'll even rephrase a little bit because they hear it in a different way, but you don't kind of go past that second point of repeating it back and making sure someone feels heard until you've gotten the message properly. Now, in a perfect world, again, both people would do this for each other. Is that always going to happen? No, you might just be the person who's going to be the one who is going to de-escalate the other person. They may not turn around and say, well, what I heard you saying is, and it won't be that kind of conversation necessarily. It would be nice, but it doesn't always happen that way. But this is really the piece of a conversation that is missing a lot of the times, is understanding what is the other person actually saying to me. And this is the difference between listening to hear and understand versus listening to respond. If you're listening to respond, that means you're sitting there not actually listening to what they've said and just coming up with your rebuttal the entire time. And this is tough stuff. It's not easy to not think of how you're going to respond. But it really is important to take the time to take a quick step back and say, okay, am I actually listening to the words that are coming out of my mouth versus listening to the words that I'm going to come up with next, right? And people really want to be listened to be heard versus listened to respond. So again, in a perfect world, maybe the other person would come back and say, okay, well, what I heard you say was this. And then from there, you would move forward. Now, the next piece is going to be figuring out a solution. This isn't always easy either. There's going to have to be more active listening in this. There's going to have to be some compromise because if you're in a conflict in the first place, not everybody's going to get everything that they want, right? It has to be some give and take there. So there's going to be some compromise, some negotiation, more communication, more active listening, brainstorming, coming up with ideas, going back and forth on how this piece is going to work together. But then ideally, you want to be able to find a solution that's going to work for both parties. And then once you found the solution, really all there is left to do is just to actually do it. Good old Nike phrase, just do it, right? And implement the solution that you're in. But that second piece of actually hearing someone and what they say is huge. When we utilize this with our participants, or when we're telling our participants about this in one of our programs that has the active listening objective, it's really important because we're not wanting them to make assumptions. We're wanting them to listen to the exact direction somebody's necessarily giving them, which is a whole lot harder than people ever think it's going to be. You know, you kind of think, oh, someone's going to give me directions and I'm just going to hang back and it's going to work. But it can be really hard to not have your own idea, or to be able to stay a little bit silent and listen to the whole idea to go along with it first without wanting to do something differently. So this is a really powerful program that we run with the horses. I love it. It is probably one of my top 3 programs that we do, because it's incredibly challenging to be able to stop and actually listen to what people say. Now, gender roles kind of come into this too. Now, before anybody hops all over me with anything, this is a generalization. I understand all people are different, okay? So I'm just putting that out there. But men and women listen differently, and they listen for different pieces to complete at the end. So men, they want to fix a problem generally, right? That's kind of how they've been trained almost DNA wise, is that they want to fix a problem. So a woman might come up to her hubby and say, oh my gosh, this happened today, this happened today, this happened today, da 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 da, and venting a little bit. And the guy could say, oh, well, why don't you just do this? Or why don't you just do that? Well, now wifey might be a little bit grumpy. Why? Because really what she wanted out of that was to be heard versus to be helped. Now, this isn't a guy's fault by any means, or that, even if it's a woman who's trying to do the help piece, it's not their fault. They're trying to help still at the end of the day. But sometimes people just want to be heard. So it's fair, if we're entering that kind of conversation, to sit back and say, okay, well, buckle up, honey. I need to let some stuff off my chest. I don't necessarily want your opinion on it. I just need to let it all go. I'd like you to nod, smile, and hug me at the end, right? It's fair if we give them that heads up that that's what we're looking for. But it's amazing how different men and women can be, even in how we listen to conversations and how we expect to get something different out of it. Even if the guy, if the one expressing, sometimes the woman wants to go deeper into what the problem is and talk it out more. Well, the guy really just wants to solve it, doesn't necessarily want to go into all those deeper pieces either. But by paying attention and actively listening to what the other person is saying, listening to understand versus listening to respond, it will kind of negate some of those pieces as well, so that people aren't going to get in a conflict for somebody trying to help them at the same time. But it's just different styles of how men and women do things as well. But if you guys have any examples on how you have done some active listening or ways that it has worked in your life, I would love to hear those as well. One thing I know with kids, it's how often do you think kids genuinely get heard? Like, really think about that for a second. We're busy. We're, as adults, as teachers, as whomever else, there's a lot going on, right? So how often do kids get genuinely heard in a situation? Well, it's not always that often. And I have to say, when I learned about this active listening cycle thing, the first place I implemented it was with my daughter, and she was just itty bitty at the time. And she would, start having a meltdown, as kids do. And instead of saying, Cassidy, stop doing that right now, da 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 da, I could get down and say, okay, so tell me what's going on right now. I want a juice box, or whatever crazy thing it might be, or my toast is cut wrong, whatever kids come up with. And then by stopping for a second and saying, okay, Cass, what I got from that is you're really upset because your toast is cut wrong. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, hon. So if your toast is cut wrong, do you think, like, is there a different thing we can do now? Or do you think we might be able to handle it today for your toast being cut wrong? Maybe I could handle it today. Okay, great. And then we can go forth. But as soon as we take the opportunity to stop and to listen, repeat back so they really feel heard, it's amazing how kids really do come down from that conflict. They can actually take the opportunity to like feel heard and then kind of start coming up with their own ideas how to fix the problems too. So it's a very empowering piece for kids to feel genuinely heard and be able to move forward that way as well. In facilitation, we do this regularly because people don't get heard every day in everyday life, and horses don't always get heard either. So we need to make sure that we're taking the opportunity to check in with all members of the team. And this is if you were having a conflict with a group of people, you'd want to make sure everybody gets the opportunity to be heard in that piece as well. We couldn't just have two people's voices being heard and not the other. It's the same with when we're working with our horses. We want to make sure the participants are heard, but also that the horses are heard and how their reactions were as well. Lisa, I try really hard lately to bite my tongue when my son wants to talk. It's hard, right? And like, as a mom, if I could fix her whole life for her, I would, right? I would make everything all better every single day because I just wish, but you can't. That can't be there every day for the rest of her life to make everything all better. Am I doing anything good by doing that? No, absolutely not. I've enabled the crap out of her if I'm doing that. I want to empower her. And by taking the opportunity to kind of step back, bite our tongue, let them talk, give them the options, then you'll see how cool and empowering it is when they can start figuring out and some of that problem solving of how to fix some of these problems, even on their own. And maybe not the way that you would fix it, but still, it's phenomenal when you can see those little brains just to work and to figure out how they can do something a little bit differently. But it is truly, Lisa, you're right. It is biting your tongue. It's taking the opportunity to really sit and listen and give it the time to do so as well. Especially split family situation. Oh, yeah, I hear you, sister. That is exactly right. We have to be able to empower them because we don't get to be there all the time, right? We have to be able to have them so that they're feeling strong in who they are when they might go to the other house or even at school. School's a crazy place now. So all of that piece as well. Gina, hi, Gina. Just journaled on this active listening. What this defined as in our Mothers and Daughters Horses program, listening to the major growth because moms and daughters exactly to be genuinely heard exactly what the horse taught them in their journaling and debriefing. My gosh, perfect timing, Gina. It's epically cool when you throw a horse into all of this as well, right? I mean, obviously we get to do this all the time and it's pretty awesome sauce. But at the end of the day, when we have a horse in all of this, it completely helps people to think of things in a different way because they have that empathy for the horse. They're taking the opportunity to speak for the horse or to understand what the horse is actually looking for, and it helps them to think of things in a different way and kind of dial it back again. We've had mother-daughter groups come in before as well, and it is really interesting to see the horse kind of personify where those little gaps might be in communication and how they can listen to each other in different ways, and especially with different communication styles. Like we talked about our last live with communication. Communication styles are huge. You may not be on the same path with even how this different styles that you were using to talk to each other. But if you take the opportunity to stop and actually listen to one another, that's a very different, then you can have a quality conversation again. People are actually feeling heard despite the fact that you might have a different way of doing things as well. I love that, Gina. That's pretty awesome too. So yeah, that's the active listening cycle, people. And it's a pretty exciting thing. And if you haven't tried it yet, I would strongly suggest you. Now, again, find your phrase. If it's not, so what I hear you saying, figure out what it is for you, something that you would normally say, because otherwise people, like, especially your kids, if you just pull it out of nowhere, or maybe your husband or something like that, or wife, if you just pull it out of nowhere and, oh, so what I heard you saying there was, they might kind of look at you funny at first. So somebody else I heard, just to recap, was theirs. That's a good one too, just depending on how it is. But it really is phenomenal how it can take people from an escalated level to a de-escalated level just by being heard. Just taking the opportunity to stop, sit back, and listen to the words that are coming from someone versus listening for the way that we can respond to the words that they had. So I hope you guys found a little bit of value out of all of this too. I love this, Gina. Active listening is the most underrated superpower from one of my biz coaches. True that. It's huge. It is huge, and it's so empowering for people to be able to hear their own words back as well. And I don't know if you guys have ever been in a conflict where you're like, I can't believe this person, like, did they hear the words coming out of their mouth? They can. You can repeat them back, but make sure it's word for word. If you start going and putting a bunch of different things in there that they didn't say, that could escalate things further. So if somebody says, you're being a real bag in all of this. Okay, so what I got from that is, you really think I'm being a bag in all of this. What are they going to say? Yeah. Right? If you say something that is different, they're going to say no. If you're in a conflict and you say, I'm not being a bag, how's that going to go? Well, nowhere. That just, now you're two 5-year-olds having an argument. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. But if you actually take the time to repeat back to them, okay, so what I got from that is, you think I'm being a real bag in this conversation. Yeah, I do. Fantastic. So how do we move forward from this? Not only have you let them hear what they've said, you don't have to keep it anymore. That gets to be in one ear, out your mouth, and it's gone. We don't have to pull back all those pieces that anybody has ever said to us. And now the onus is on them to figure out what they need to move past that piece as well. So it's hugely phenomenal to pull this in so many facets in life, with your significant others, with ex-significant others, with kids, in your businesses. If you have conflict in business, this is huge as well, because people do. They just want to be heard in this life too. Good morning, Erica. Good to see you on. Barely made it here. Topic is very timely. We'll have to catch the replay later. Oh yeah, please do. Let me know what you think. But I hope this has helped you guys out today. We'll continue on our journey through all of these lovely objectives for equine assisted learning that we run as well, because they are truly phenomenal, and how they can really apply to every single one of our lives. When people do this program with the horses, they have the opportunity to step back and see how it is that they're communicating. How much are they actively listening with the people in their lives thus far, and then apply it to the skills that they have going further. We have a bunch of other things on TikTok too that we're talking about with horsey stuff. So I always like to throw up our little TikTok-y, just in case anybody's on that one. TikTok-y's fun, guys, and you should join it, because it's a good time. But go check us out on TikTok as well. And then, of course, if you do have any questions about the certification or how you can live your dream of working with horses, as well as helping people to grow with skills just like active listening, then make sure that you can send us a message. I'll throw out my email here too, or you can just PM us on Facebook as well. But I hope you all have a lovely day, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And don't forget, every single one of you out there is a life changer, whether it's through active listening or saying a kind word, or just being a friend for that day. Make sure that you are always the life changer that you've always wanted to be, and you can change somebody's life every single day. Have a great one, everybody. Talk to you next time.